Hi everyone, CA here. Recently Matthew Colville made this tweet, which got me thinking. I've noticed more and more that the stuff I grew up thinking of as sci-fi seems a lot more like fantasy to me now. Like John Berkeley's art. Or even blank, like holograms. Holograms should be a fantasy trope. Just like laser swords. Nothing science about that blank. Can you play sci-fi in Dungeons & Dragons? Now, I had already been thinking a bit along those lines since last June when my Icewind Dale character got handed a laser pistol by a mind flayer. But to answer that, I think we need to first ask, what is science fiction? Well, an actual discussion would be hours of content that says nothing, so I'll stick with this. Wikipedia defines it as a genre of speculative fiction which typically deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts such as advanced science and technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universes, and extraterrestrial life. It has been called the literature of ideas and often explores the potential consequences of scientific, social, and technological innovations. Of course, there is then the subgenre of science fantasy, where fantasy plots and ideas are given a science fiction spin. Prominent examples being Star Wars and Dune. D&D blurs the lines between fantasy and sci-fi even further in its central Forgotten Realms lore by dragging in elements that are classically sci-fi, such as space travel and laser weapons, and couching their world building in fantasy-sounding language. Which brings me neatly to my next point. Is science fiction already in D&D? Well, the short answer is yes. I'm not talking about things like the Mass Effect and Destiny total conversion projects, although those are really cool. Forgotten Realms already has lasers, spaceships, and teleportation. Matthew Mercer explicitly drew on modern sci-fi concepts such as the multiverse and quantum entanglement when creating Dunamancy. You can even play as a robot, although the background and world building of the Warforged is couched in fantasy terms to explain magical healing, instead of using mend. Psionics are also a staple of classic sci-fi and a well-established part of D&D. In addition, the recommended reading list in the back of the PHB and Dungeon Master's Guide include Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom series and the works of Frederick Brown, whose most famous contribution was the Star Trek TOS episode Arena. So the foundation is there, but the question remains. How would you play a sci-fi campaign? Well, simply put, you'd change the flavor text. Maybe instead of being a dragon, one of the sorcerer's ancestors is an alien so advanced they transcended the need for physical bodies. Maybe druids, instead of being worshippers of nature, are connected to the life force of the entire galaxy. A gunslinger fighter wouldn't look all that out of place in a Starfleet uniform, I know. Of course, some subclasses or classes might not fit into the story you're hoping to tell. I'd have a hard time seeing something like a blood hunter fitting into a sci-fi script. But you and your players can discuss this up front when pitching the game. You'll have to be careful, too. You aren't going to have a convincing story if you're trying to use 5e for something like The Martian or the new Battlestar Galactica. But something more Star Wars inspired? Maybe even something drawing from Forbidden Planet, the original Battlestar Galactica, or the old Jerry Anderson sci-fi? Absolutely. Of course, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this.